I was on boots on the ground for about 14 years before transitioning to this current position. And that's where a lot of the passion came from, to ensure that our tribal voices were being heard and that our families who were entering the state systems were afforded their proper right in accordance to the Indian Child Welfare Act. And we knew that something more had to be done to add these additional protections that are outlined in the Indian Family Protection Act. So I am currently the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium's sitting president. I've been serving in an officer capacity for 7 years since establishment of NMTIC, who I've shared space, and we've learned through trial and error with my other tribal partners and brothers and sisters that are on NMTIC, specifically Ms. Bird and our founder of NMTIC, Donalyn Sarracino. So I hope to present to you some valid information that you can carry within your own tribal agencies or state agencies. And Julie?
Good afternoon, everyone. I first and foremost would like to say thank you for allowing me to just be here with you all today. Hopefully the information I'm able to contribute to this discussion and this presentation will be helpful to whatever intentions or initiatives you all may be either looking at starting in your tribal communities or working with your state partners, or you know, I just hope I can offer y'all something today. My name is Julie Bird. I represent the Pueblo of Nambe, and I serve as their ICWA manager for that tribal community. I myself am an enrolled member of Okeowinge, which sits in the northern area of New Mexico, and it is one of the northern pueblos, as well as Nambe Pueblo. I live in Okeowinge, and my children are also enrolled members of Okeowinge. And so for me, the experience I carry to share with y'all today is I've had the privilege and the blessing of working for several of the northern Pueblo tribal communities, as well as the urban area of Albuquerque, with regards to our tribal people. And I see the work that I do. I hear what I'm trying to communicate with everyone and build partnerships and collaboration in an effort to best serve not only my tribal community, but the future generations of my family. And so I do that with great passion and hopefully a good heart. So with that, I would like to turn it over to start our presentation today. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. So just a little bit of background on how, and for those of you who participated in the first and part one of this series, you learned a little bit about, heard a little bit about how the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium was formed and established. And prior to coming into my current role, as the director for a tribal social service agency, I was fortunate and blessed enough to be a member of the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium. And at that time, New Mexico CYFD had a tribal liaison position. And this, so there was already work being done or established relationships trying to be made in that regards. And you all also heard during part one about the formation of the New Mexico Partners Group, which consists of New Mexico CYFD representation, NMTIC representation, representation from Navajo Nation, representation from the Administrative Office of the Courts, Corrine Wolf Law, and lots of other great partners that I I'm sure I'm going to forget, but Julie or Jackie, please feel free to jump in. So when the office was formed, I came in as a tribal liaison, and really quickly, CYFD is a branch of is an umbrella with like 3 main divisions, right? We have our protective services division, and that handles all our ICWA cases. We have a children's behavioral health, and we also have the juvenile justice services. And then we have other support offices like our wonderful colleagues with workforce development, our Office of Children's Rights, and other offices that help support all of CYFD. And so under the previous administration, former Cabinet Secretary Brian Blaylock and former Deputy Secretary Terry Locke were really concerned about the relationships that were with tribes. I was still on the tribal side when they came into the administration, and had really quickly wanted to hear from our tribal partners what was needed, how we could repair the relationship between our tribal partners and the state. And through that process, our tribal partners were really able to get to know the administration and really have an understanding of kind of all the entities within this one huge umbrella. And I don't, Jackie or Julie, I don't know if you want to share just a little bit about that relationship. I think it would be great, because they heard directly from the tribes how just having like one person, I will always ask, like, am I supposed to be like all things tribal to the entire department all the time, right? It's not going to happen. It was not working. And so in June of 2020, shortly after the pandemic started, I sat down with the administration, and we really talked about how if we were serious about really supporting and hearing and collaborating with our tribes, we needed to expand out. Like, it couldn't just be one person as the tribal liaison for an agency that has over 1,100 employees. And so, so in June of 2020, the Office of Tribal Affairs was established, and it is housed within the Office of the Secretary. And then just this past legislative session, the office is actually codified into legislative statute. But I wanna ask Julie and Jackie just to share their experience in how we were able to really get the ball rolling in helping us to identify the needs and how to effectively address the needs and hear the concerns from our tribal partners.
Thank you, Donalyn. So every tribe had a different experience. For Isleta, we had more of a stronger relationship with actually one individual in a specific county. And we knew that we wanted that across the board with all of the county offices that we were going to partner with when it came to our ICWA cases. So when we started having these more in-depth conversations amongst the consortium, we learned that we had a tribal liaison who may or may not have been heavily involved with some of the tribes and the duties that they were supposed to be upholding within the state agency. So because there was a lot of discrepancy with that role and what the actual intent was, we had conversations about how to make it better and what we as tribes needed from the state partners and how we can create change that is going to be an all-inclusive with the tribes and state workers to ensure that our families who were involved in the systems weren't negatively impacted. So what that looked like was we needed to truly be at the table when there was conversations about our tribes and our tribal families. Families are going to always be the experts in their lives, but to exclude them and not have them at the table and hear their voice was really an unjust to them. And with conversations occurring about our tribal families, about tribal policies or tribal interventions and practices without having the tribes there was another unjust. So we knew that we needed to have that contact who we could trust within the agency. So we built off of the relationships that we had with Donalyn, with Cynthia Shavers, with Beth Gilia, a few who were in the office already at that time, that we were able to have these courageous conversations to truly say what the tribes wanted. At that time, working with former Secretary Blaylock, he heard us. During this conversation, we were honest to use that time for the tribe's opportunity to voice what our frustrations and ongoing challenges were with meeting the tribe's need and truly listening to tribal voices, and what we needed the support in when we're helping our families navigate through the state system. So with that, we were able to identify who we as tribes were more comfortable turning to, because what we were seeing were a lot of miscommunications in a bunch of areas. When it came down to permanency planning workers or investigators, protective services workers, the information was not being delivered at those levels, and it was muddied throughout its process. So for us, it was easier to go to one specific person. And with this, the discussion of the Office of Tribal Affairs was identified and discussed, where we were able to build a list of goals and strategically plan how the communication was going to go and how we wanted to move forward in that collaboration with our state partner. So that's my experience with the Pueblo of Isleta, and I'm sure Nambe has a different view on how they were able to grasp some of these concepts. Julie?
Good afternoon, everyone. So for the Pueblo of Nambe, as I shared in webinar 1, we've had a pretty good amount of ICWA cases, not only for the state of New Mexico, but outside of the state as well. But one of the things I've come to really appreciate as a tribal practitioner with the establishment of the Office of Tribal Affairs is the ICWA compliance for our children and our tribe. Meaning that there have been particular practices that have been implemented through the suggestions of the tribes to the Office of Tribal Affairs, and that brainstorming and planning process has created some really specific practices to assist the state of New Mexico's Children, Youth, and Families Department to become compliant with the Indian Child Welfare Act. For a significant period of my employment, and I say significant, but I've been there 4 years now. But you know, the first couple of years, it was very challenging in a sense of me as a tribal practitioner learning new things about the Indian Child Welfare Act. In my role for the community of Nambe Pueblo, I started seeing the gaps. I started seeing the lack of communication, and I started seeing in a more clearer way the harm it was creating for our children of Nambe when it came to the lack of ICWA compliance with children, youth, and families here with New Mexico. So once the Office of Tribal Affairs became established within CYFD under the Secretary of CYFD, you know, we had an actual line of communication with CYFD is how to best explain it. We were actually able to communicate effectively and also really strongly advocate for culture, heritage, the tribe's sovereignty. All of that started happening when the Office of Tribal Affairs became established. And I say that from lived experience as a practitioner working ICWA cases for the state of New Mexico. So I just want to share that, you know, considerations, thoughts, ideas of, an Office of Tribal Affairs within a state child welfare system. Is that doable? Is that possible? I would strongly focus on that as maybe something as a goal, because it has made a world of difference for the Pueblo of Nambe in regards to ICWA compliance, as well as just our recognition at the table. And when there's a vacant seat at a roundtable discussion involving one of our tribal children, the question is now asked, why is the tribe not here? When before that just was not the case. We were just kind of like overlooked and minimized. And when it comes to our tribal children, you know, I think that with this partnership with the state, we're coming hopefully to a better place of acknowledging the importance and the significance of this child being tribal and how important their tribal voice is at the table. So I just want to share that with you all. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Julie and Jackie. And I just want to point something out too. I truly believe Creator puts things in our path for a reason. And you know, I think I've been fortunate in that my previous experience as a tribal social service director really helped to facilitate my transition into this role. And other partners of New Mexico partners include the New Mexico Tribal State Judicial Consortium. And on that, we one of the members of that particular consortium was our Supreme Court Justice Barbara Vigil, who is now our cabinet secretary for CYFD. And another I think pivotal thing just to raise is that also a part of New Mexico Partners was Corrine Wolf, and the director for Corrine Wolf was Beth Gilia, who is now one of CYFD's deputy secretaries. And so so through the formation of the office and now the support, you know, that we continue to get from the office of the secretary and the work that we're doing with the tribes, like these two individuals, Cabinet Secretary Vigil and Deputy Secretary Gilia, were familiar with the tribes, were familiar with who and what they brought to the table because of the interactions that NMTIC, Navajo Nation, you know, were having through those other avenues. And so I think that speaks volumes in that we can't ignore, right, what the concerns or the issues that the tribes are bringing forth anymore. And so again, the Office of Tribal Affairs is housed within the Office of the Secretary, and we're charged with implementing, this is actual language from the statute. The Office of Tribal Affairs shall be dedicated to ensuring the department's compliance and full implementation of the Indian Family Protection Act, as well as ICWA, right? There are provisions which we'll talk about in part 3 of this series that exceed ICWA. And so, so the Office of Tribal Affairs really is a support for tribes as well as the department's workforce. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Next slide, please. So again, the tribal liaison was a position that existed, and coming into this position in 2019, we were really able to really get some momentum going. The department also established an ICWA unit as a pilot in Bernalillo County, which is in Albuquerque. And at the time, it was the region of the state that had our highest number of ICWA cases. So this unit was established in 2019 as well, but discussions for this unit came from strategic plans from the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium, as well as New Mexico partners. So I would say probably 3 or 4 years prior to this unit being established, there was already that discussion happening on the tribal side, as well as with external partners from across the state. And the same goes for the ICWA court, also established as a pilot in Bernalillo County. And the court started taking cases January 1st of 2020. And since then, there is just some amazing outcomes that we're seeing about this. And I wish I had all the data from the court on this, but one of the things that sticks out to me the most, that since its inception, there have been no terminations of parental rights in the ICWA court, and they have a really amazing placement rate, and they work in collaboration again with the unit. So I believe it was around 73% relative placement rate, which is higher than CYFD across the state. And so the establishment of the court, the ICWA unit, right, the office, it's just started all coming together from work that had been happening 2, 3, 4 years prior. Next slide, please. Like Julie mentioned, one of the things that seems to have really taken off with the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium, and Julie and Jackie, please feel free to jump in, because this is definitely, you are definitely the folks who should be speaking about NMTIC, but I think it has really given the tribes an opportunity to come together and have a united voice. One of the things that we do with the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium is we participate in their meetings as interested parties. So we have time on their agenda every single month, and they meet on a monthly basis. I'm also aware that they staff cases on a monthly basis. So as a state agency, right, it's really hard for us to for our practice to not be consistent. And we're still growing, right? And so I don't want to say that there's not inconsistency from what happens on one end of the state to the other, because there is. But what's been really helpful to us is our tribal partners will bring to our attention things that are like, hey, this is happening in one of your metro offices. We know you can do this because, you know, the regional office manager in Metro said this could happen, right? And so we're wondering why it can't happen in this other part of the state, right? And so that gives us an opportunity to look at it and really look at training opportunities to make practice more consistent across the board. And I know that the consortium, the ICWA reps on the consortium get a lot of support and encouragement from one another. And again, really unite as one voice, not against the state, in hopes of collaborating with the state, right? Like they are our experts. Our tribal partners are our experts. And I know that, right, as big state agencies, we're used to rolling out policies and procedures and like thinking, oh, this will be good for everybody, right? And we're really good at saying nothing about us without us. But sometimes, right, we're so big, we don't really follow that. And so we need that input from our tribal partners to say, hey, like, this is not working, right? Like we really do need to have input on the different things that are happening. And we'll touch on that as well here in a few slides. But Jacqueline or Julie, was there anything else you wanted to add on this slide?
I do, Donalyn. I think this is where one of the major values to the OTA partnering with NMTIC in our monthly meetings has been most useful, amongst other things, is participating in the morning sessions of the consortium meeting, because there are 23 tribal nations in New Mexico. How realistic is it for CYFD to deliver the same information to all 23 tribes and nations? Well, we figured that this would be the best way to do that because all of the tribes are there. Well, most tribes are there at the same time, where we can hear through full transparency what is being discussed on the state level and what policies and practices are either being discussed or what have been changed or are now in place that are going to impact tribes and the practices for our cases involving ICWA. So during these conversations, we're looking at that and we're offering some recommendations on how to best improve best practice outcomes at that time. And from there and those conversations, then we know we're going to get an email from Donalyn within a couple of days saying, hey, there's another work group, here's a meeting to carry on what the tribe's request and recommendations were. So there's actually some product that's being developed when we're voicing the ongoing challenges, or we're looking at practices that are actually working in these ICWA cases. So when we're making those recommendations, there is some type of a product that's being developed. And we do that best as a group when we're doing it together with state and tribes together. It's demonstrated through trial and error, even recently with a number of work groups, where it's very difficult to man all of these work groups and having few representation here and there, but it's more productive when we're able to do it during the consortium meeting with OTA there, where it's full transparency and those recommendations are being provided and we're able to share one another's experience and perception of these different cases that were coming forward in staffing. The other is the staffing, and this is a huge accomplishment for NMTIC, is when we staff our cases, we were doing those in closed sessions, meaning it was just for seated members only. We didn't want any of our partners to hear the outcome of the cases or what cases we were having challenges with for the sake of retaliation against the state, coming from the state workers or with those specific regions. But eventually through the years, as we started discussing these, we knew that we needed CYFD to be part of those case staffings. So with OTA there, and I believe Cynthia Shavers was the primary person with Donalyn who would be present during these case staffings, where we would give a brief synopsis of the case and then identify the areas of non-compliance with ICWA and create a plan. It was very helpful to have OTA there because they were able to speak on behalf of policy and procedure that their workers should be following when it came to the state decisions, which was helpful in helping us create a comprehensive plan in how the tribe was going to respond in these cases that we were staffing. So that was a huge accomplishment, and that is a success with us moving forward when we have to discuss some of these more complex cases. Julie?
Thank you. For myself, I think just, coming from that place of doing the actual work, engaging with families, speaking in the most loudest way for the advocacy of the tribe I represent, and I've shared this on many platforms, the Office of Tribal Affairs, and I've always shared this even in meetings involving Secretary Vigil with CYFD, that, the Office of Tribal Affairs, I see is your lifeline to the tribes. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think that, that is a valuable asset to CYFD. And you don't want to just, minimize the recommendations or suggestions that are being relayed through OTA to CYFD, because those recommendations and suggestions are coming from what is being shared in the NMTIC platform. And so I really truly want to express that again here, that we really want to share with you all the importance of how people's roles in this partnership building are very critical to some of the goals and the ways we're able to accomplish those goals here, especially in New Mexico with the tribes and the state. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. Next slide, please. Through these efforts, we've seen lots of positive outcomes. And they're really exciting, right? Like, I think the biggest, one of the biggest things in my mind is really the state being mindful and being willing to be inclusive of our nation's tribes and pueblos here in New Mexico. I know when I'm in meetings on the state side, right, I'm constantly asking, like, we are going to need to get tribal input on this, right? Or we need to start the discussions on the tribe before we roll out anything. And if something does roll out, you know, and because again, it's a huge agency, I'm not aware of everything that gets rolled out. And so I'm like, where was OTA in this discussion, right? Where were our tribes in this discussion? And there have been situations where we've had to put the brakes on rolling out procedure because we didn't include our tribal partners. And I know that can, like, when we're in a hurry and go, right, and get these things accomplished, you know, sometimes we have to slow it down, right? If we really want to be true to our word of being inclusive, we have to slow it down, and we have to allow our tribes to have input into procedures that is not only affecting their tribal children, but also affecting their communities and who their people are for 7 generations from now, right? And so that is something, that's something huge. I think the other thing is that it's really given our nation's pueblos and tribes an opportunity to advocate. I remember being on the tribal side and getting invited to like a state-run, we call them family-centered meetings, and walking in, and there's the parents, 1 or 2 parents, maybe 1 or 2 family members, the tribal rep, right, of 1, and then, man, the department's rolling in deep with like 8 to 15 people, right? And so as a tribal worker, that was intimidating, and I can only imagine how intimidating that was for our families, right? And so really looking at how we interact with our tribal families and our tribal partners, and the fact that they've united their voices, right? It's kind of, I wouldn't say that the scales are completely balanced, but it's helped tilt it so it's not so department heavy, right? And like, it's not the department's agenda. It's really a collaborative of what the agenda should be. I think the other thing that was just super exciting, and I know Julie asks me all the time, like, when NMTIC was founded, did you ever see New Mexico Indian Family Protection Act as the result of that, right? And it just blows me away every single time. So that process leading up to the passage of New Mexico's Indian Family Protection Act is just, you know, it's more than a dream come true. And that's just something that, you know, the credit goes to all of our tribes and our leaders and our advocates for doing that work for years before even the consortium was established. And then again, as I mentioned early on, Office of Tribal Affairs is now embedded and incorporated as part of that legislative statute. So one of the other things too, and just to give you all an idea of the structure of OTA, or Office of Tribal Affairs, currently I have 3 positions, a behavioral health tribal coordinator, a juvenile justice services tribal coordinator, which we are doing interviews for soon, and protective services tribal coordinator. And I also am fortunate enough to have, like, who I just consider my right hand, our administrative consultant currently staff the Office of Tribal Affairs. And these individuals are just phenomenal and advocates, and really, you know, focused on on the work that needs to be done to improve our relationships, but also to help support staff, right? And to help give them that guidance. And as subject matter experts in the department, we have staff reaching out like, hey, I have this situation, right? We're not really sure what to do, or I don't know if I have the right tribal contact. I haven't heard back. Can you put me in, help me get in contact? Things like that, right? And that makes a huge difference. We'll also be expanding our office here soon to include an Indian child welfare training coordinator, a quality assurance manager who will help, who will be helping to do compliance reviews statewide on all of our ICWA cases, as well as a resource parent training coordinator. One other thing that I feel just really fortunate and blessed is that the department, through the administration, has really recognized the need for this. So we have in our Office of General Counsel, we have an Assistant General Counsel, Cindy Aragon, who is just I call her my work big sister, and she's just amazing, and she handles all things tribal. So Cindy and I work really closely, and having her in the Office of General Counsel, that really helps strengthen the work that we're doing, right? We also have a recently appointed from the governor of New Mexico, recently appointed a special projects coordinator into the office of the secretary. And he is former governor for the Pueblo of Nambe. Philip Perez is also part of that. So in the office of the secretary, right, with myself, with Councilman Perez, with Cindy Aragon and my staff, right, we meet and we were able to ensure that we're attending as many work groups as we can on different initiatives. So I have a question for participants, and you can just put your answer here in the chat, and a poll's gonna come up soon. Just based on what you've heard, what other outcomes have you experienced in working with your state partners?
And Donalyn, we there's also a question in the Q&A that we might want to get to after the poll.
Okay, great. How much time do we want to give for the chat responses?
We could, why don't we talk about this question while give people some time to write in the chat. So the question is, there was the mention of an ICWA court. Is that in one county in New Mexico? Is there a plan to establish more? What has been the impact on ICWA cases since the specialized court has been operational?
That is an excellent question. Right now, the ICWA court is just in one county, our Bernalillo County in New Mexico, which actually at the time of its inception had the largest ICWA caseload for the state. And there are plans to expand. We're actually in discussions now with the administrative office of the courts, with judges in different districts, and of course with our tribal partners. And so we meet through the New Mexico partners that we talked about last session, meets on a quarterly basis. I happen to be on the work group for ICWA court infrastructure in New Mexico. And in between those meetings, we also meet weekly. And so there will be another ICWA court expanding somewhere in New Mexico. We're hoping, in the next couple years. I don't think it'll take a couple years, but it's definitely something that we want to see roll out across all the districts. And I think with the Indian Family Protection Act and, ICWA and the administration, there's a lot of support behind that, and the outcomes, right? Like the outcomes that ICWA Court is seeing, it's amazing. Our ICWA Court also has the presiding judge is Judge Catherine Begay, and she's a member of the Navajo Nation. And my understanding is she's the only presiding judge of an ICWA Court that is from a tribal community. So that we're very proud of her and the work that she's doing there. Next slide, please.
And Donalyn, just really quickly, I know there was an additional question on the impacts with ICWA cases. Based on the data that we heard recently during a New Mexico Partners meeting, and based on the data that Donalyn shared earlier, there are positive outcomes because of ICWA Court and the way that these cases are being handled, whether it's through staffing or procedure, or even findings through the court. It is successful. The impacts of these mean that more than none, children are placed with families. We know that's at 73%. We know that there's no ICWA case that has been through ICWA Court that has resulted in a termination of parental rights. And majority of these cases have been closed with reunification, and 100% of those cases in ICWA Court have not returned through another dependency or abuse or neglect petition. That says a lot, and that's the reason why New Mexico Partners is striving for additional ICWA courts throughout the state of New Mexico.
Thank you, Jackie. So let's see. Can we go? Oh, there, okay, sorry. I was looking at the wrong screen. So again, state leadership's very mindful and wants to be very inclusive about the partnerships that we have going on. Next slide, please, Angela. So these are additional ways that we partner with our tribal communities. And again, because there are 23 different nations, pueblos, and tribes here in New Mexico, right? Like oftentimes we can get caught up in saying, oh, we had tribal representation, right? And it may be from a Pueblo. That Pueblo doesn't speak for all 23 tribes, and all 23 tribes have very different customs and traditions and beliefs, right? And so having one or two tribal representatives attend one or two meetings that, like in our eyes, does not constitute like meaningful tribal engagement. And so we're really working on ensuring that we invite our tribal partners and encourage their participation, and meet at times that tries to accommodate. It's very hard to try and accommodate 23 tribes, right? Plus department staff. And so having things like set times, right? So we can all plan around it, like just different things like that to ensure continuity and consistency. The Office of Tribal Affairs and our Office of General Counsel with Ms. Aragon, we have time set aside every Friday where we meet with our nation's pueblos and tribes individually, specifically on Title 4E. Most of the pueblos, nations, and tribes here are not 4E direct tribes. Navajo Nation is 4E direct, but with everybody else, we meet with them and talk about like, how can we enter into joint powers agreements so we can help pass through that 4E. And Melissa Soto and Eric Gallegos and Justin Hunter are also part of that team, and they're on the CYFD side as well. And it's just an amazing group that comes together to meet, and sometimes we're meeting with the same tribe 3 or 4 or 5 times before they enter into a JPA, because we want to make sure it's going to work for them and their communities. But that Friday is dedicated time every week to our tribal partners. We also host an annual Indian Child Welfare Summit. So this year will be our 3rd annual, super excited about that. And it's the day after Indigenous Peoples Day of every year on purpose, right? For a reason, to really allows us across the state to come together. So we have state and tribal judges, state and tribal caseworkers, state and tribal attorneys, tribal leaders attending this summit. And I was sharing earlier before the seminar got started, Last year we had 500 attendees, right? So that was pretty exciting. Again, we continue to work with New Mexico partners. One of the other things that we've done after this past legislative session and seeing how much really seeing how much our policy impacts our tribal communities when we don't have their input. And in some cases, it can be really detrimental, right? Like we don't know the negative impacts of our communities if we're not talking to the people that it's impacting. So every Wednesday afternoon, we meet with our tribal partners, and they have an opportunity to review line by line our policy and procedure and give input and comment. And then, you know, we take their input and comment and try and make it work. And revise it, right? If it needs to be revised. We just spent 4 months reviewing our relative licensing procedure that was rolled out without input, right? And now we're like, wow, like this really impacts, right? Like we definitely need to make these changes. We also last year started our out of preferred placement reviews. So every 30 days, if a Native child is in non-preferred ICWA placement and now non-preferred IFPA placement, we review that case in the county every 30 days until the child is in a preferred placement. And so all the parties are there, right? Parents, parent attorneys, extended family who are looking at, guardian ad litems, CYFD staff, and our tribal partners. And so there's clear next steps that are identified from month to month until that child is in a preferred placement. We also provide training opportunities to our tribal partners. They can take part in the same training that our staff do, which is really important, right? So they understand like what we're doing and have an opportunity to ask questions. And something that I'm super excited and proud of is the work that our tribal partners are doing with our workforce development, where they're given input. There's a IFPA curriculum being developed from our tribal partners in collaboration with our training team here. So big kudos to everybody on that work group. That work group also meets at a dedicated time every single week. And so it's just really amazing. It's really amazing what's happening. Lots of momentum here. So I do have another question for the chat. What other important factors? What are other important factors to consider when developing these partnerships? If you all just want to take a minute to put your responses in the chat, if you have any thoughts.
There's also a question in the Q&A. The question is, have you been able to accomplish finding more foster homes in Native households?
That's an excellent question. And we are doing work right now with our Office of Tribal Affairs, our Office of General Counsel team, our workforce development team, developing a specialized recruitment and retention plan for our Native resource parents, resource families. And one of the things that we know from our tribal communities is they recruit differently, right? Like they're not recruiting to have pools of resource parents, right? They're recruiting because they want the child to stay with family or extended family within the community, right? And so we, following the review of the relative placement procedure, we are now working on a specialized recruitment plan. We work really hard to ensure our staff are honoring tribal licenses. So if a tribe has licensed a family, we honor it. We place in their licensed home, you know, and there have been situations as well where, and I don't know if he's on. I don't look at the participant list. It kind of makes me a little bit nervous to see the amount of people on. But I know like our ICWA specialist supervisor, he's gone and done home studies with our tribal partners, right? Or on the phone, right? Doing a video walkthrough to ensure that, you know, we're mindful of culture and different things like that. And so I know our leadership staff in the Metro has been working really hard, and super proud of all of them that are, because it's not easy, right? Like, and it's a major paradigm shift, cultural shift for the agency to be so inclusive and open to having our tribal partners part of the process, of every step of the process along the way. And so we are working on really making sure that we are focusing in on licensing our tribal families here in New Mexico. Next slide, please. There are continued barriers and challenges, and I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline and Julie to talk a little bit more about some of the experiences that our tribal partners are experiencing, and happy to follow up.
Thanks, Donalyn. So our main barrier has been the actual shift, you know, understanding what cultural humility is, understanding our own internal biases when working with a population that is not of our own, And part of that unknown is not knowing how the other ethnic families live. And more often than none, we were seeing that unknown was causing these barriers in positive outcomes, because a non-tribal person working with a Native family is not familiar with tribal policies, laws, customs, traditions. We were seeing that there were more excuses saying, well, we cannot find family. Well, who did you contact? Did you actually identify family, but they turned you down? No, but there was always an excuse not to even make that attempt. So again, part of this shift is understanding our own biases and not be afraid to ask. What we're seeing is folks are assuming an answer without even asking the question. A lot of the challenges that we're seeing is with leadership within the CYFD office. We can have a very good dialogue with those who have this decision-making capacity, but when it comes to boots on the ground, field workers, that information is not being delivered to them. Not only that, we see that state field workers don't have that support and guidance from their oversights. And that's huge, because our first point of contact when we're working these ICWA cases are going to be with the investigators, with the PPWs. And if they don't have that information or that support or guidance, that's going to be a huge barrier and an ongoing challenge to make sure that there's compliance with ICWA and IFCA, but also to ensure that there's some positive outcomes for our families and that they are with their families. So I see those as ongoing challenges. When we are talking about having the tribes at the table, we truly mean a partnership. We truly mean an ongoing discussion and collaboration for a product. We don't want to be invited for the sake of checking a box. We don't want to be invited for the sake of filling an empty chair, but we truly want you to listen to us. Because when that doesn't happen, and we've seen more recently during these work groups, is if you as a state worker are delivering us a policy change and you want our opinion after you created it, telling us how we should operate as a tribe, we're not going to accept it. We're going to kick it back to you and we're going to return it with a bunch of red lines. So it's best that you truly embrace the relationships and have this collaboration in the beginning, so we're all getting it right. We want to learn from each other. We want to be able to talk with one another, ask questions, and then build a meaningful partnership, policies and procedures, and best practice outcomes that's going to be all inclusive for the tribe, the state, and most of all, our impacted families. And we're not able to get there until we truly are ready to make that shift. And we have to be honest with ourselves when we're working these relationships, and being true, being true to what you're saying and what you're telling the tribes, because the tribes are going to start holding the state accountable more now than ever, because IFPA is our baby. Those are our tribal testimonies of lives that have been impacted. And we're not going to stand down and be railroaded when there's individuals out there who are refusing to work with tribal communities. So for what that is worth, we're hoping that moving forward and working these various work groups with the state agencies, that is heard across the state, and that we're taking at our word of what we're requesting and really demanding as tribal voices, coming from a place of sovereignty and from a place who has our own government and our own ability to create law. So that's my piece. Julie, I will turn it over to you, who I know.
And I'm aware of the time. So Julie, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Just really quickly, I think I just want to go back a little ways to the ICWA Summit New Mexico hosted last year. We were very blessed to have the keynote speaker be Secretary Vigil, who had just came into office. And as a tribal person, we hear a lot of what people say, but we're watching what people do. And so part of her keynote presentation was platinum standard, was something that stood out for me, transparency and collaboration. And so with those things in mind that still have resonated with me, I'm still looking forward to seeing how all those played out, because right now we're going through a lot of hurdles and challenges in regards to trying to get to that place. So I don't think that it's being practiced 100% as a tribal practitioner. But, one of the things we've been gifted with and blessed with as Indigenous people is we learn to be aware of our 5 senses. And so through our observations and engagements with with state partners, there's some things that just don't quite match up with those 5 senses. And so, that's the reason I say it's not at 100% right now. I would gauge it somewhere below 50, to be honest with you. But I really feel that, as Miss Jackie has shared, tribes are at a place where we're not just occupying a seat on the bus anymore. We're saying, give us an opportunity to be a part of whatever goes on the bus, including driving, because how are you ever going to know where you're getting to if you're trying to get to a tribal community and you don't even know the map? And so we're at that place now as Indigenous voices, as tribal representatives for our tribal communities here in New Mexico. So thank you. I'm sorry, Miss Esther, it took a little bit.
That's okay. Thank you, Julie. So that's a wonderful segue into come back next week for part 3 of this wonderful series. And next week you'll be effectively implementing stronger ICWA protections in New Mexico. So join us next week for continuing the story. Thank you so much.